Hey, welcome back to another episode of The Lonely Liberal Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Zankin, and I'm so happy to have you on this lovely Wednesday, or whenever you're listening to the show. We got a good show for you today. Dare I say, a great show. We're going to be talking about all of the countries the Trump administration has bombed in 2025/2026 now, I guess. And the reason why we're going to be talking about this, obviously with all the drama in Venezuela happening, but, Trump has often declared himself the president of peace, right? Or the president, no more foreign wars, no more foreign conflicts. And I thought it'd be interesting to kind of go through each of the 7 countries that the U.S. has struck. So obviously, bomb striked. We're going to talk about what that means. We're going to talk about why they said they did what they did, how many people were killed or how many people reported to killed. Do we think it will continue? And at the end of the day, do I think it was justified? And just as a blanket statement before we even get into it, obviously I'm not for war. I'm a anti-war guy, but, different scenarios. I'm also understand the reality of this stuff, and it varies, right? It's a spectrum of how valid these things are, or how understandable at least they are for what it happens. But obviously, I, in general, am anti-war, obviously. I keep saying obvious, but it should be said. So yeah, this will be really interesting. I'm really glad to have you here. And without further ado, let's get to it. All right, so when I say bombed or struck or something like that, what am I talking about? Because different sources, count these things in different ways. So for the purpose of this show, we are counting strike as airstrikes, drone strikes, and naval missile strikes. Okay, so this is the kind of criteria I'm going to be using, and like I said, it's important to know that different sites do different things. In total, since January 20th, 2025, there have been over 620 overseas bombings done by the Trump administration, okay? So that's the overall score. And again, just as a disclaimer here, some governments don't publish body counts when we talk about deaths earlier. So we're relying on different independent monitoring sites and stuff like that, which, again, aren't necessarily 100% accurate, but they're the most precise information we have. So we have to go with it, or I'm choosing to go with it rather than that. All right, so I've broken this up into tiers, right? And the first tier is countries that have had one strike on them, right? They've been bombed one time. And let's go through it. All right, so for the first country, we are going to be talking about Iraq. So the U.S. has bombed Iraq once this year on March 13th, 2025. And what it was, according to Central Command, which, by the way, you can just go to their website, CENTCOM.com. It was a precision strike with Iraqi forces, killing some ISIS members, including the global number 2 for ISIS, whose name is very difficult to pronounce. Like I said, they said it's killed 2 people. Will this continue, right? Will these kind of isolated counter-terrorist attacks happen in Iraq or wherever? Probably. I wouldn't be surprised if another one of these types of things happen. They happen pretty randomly depending on when different pieces of intelligence get through, and likely that will happen again sometime over the next 3 years. What's the case for it? Well, you've killed a targeted ISIS leader. It was coordinated with Iraqi forces, pretty narrow. Against would be, not a lot of transparency, not a lot of coordination with Congress. If civilians were harmed, would it have been worth it and stuff like that? Now, Central Command does say they identified him via a DNA match prior to the raid, so they were very, very certain. In this case, it feels fairly justified. I mean, when it comes to an attack of any kind, this seems as precise as you're going to get. Okay, so the next one, we are going to talk about Nigeria. This happened on Christmas Day, December 25th, in the Sokoto state, which is an area of Nigeria. So, again, another strike against ISIS camps, and this was also coordinated with the Nigerian authorities. They don't report exactly how many people died. It just says multiple ISIS terrorists, which, no number provided there, just multiple. And will this continue? Well, probably only if Nigeria requests support. I mean, or there's some major intel that says, oh, ISIS is doing something here. Again, very similar to the Iraq example, this is a partner-supported counterterrorism thing, very limited. And again, it's the case against us. We don't actually know how many people died, right? So what the hell is going on with that? On the justification scale, again, similarly to the Iraq one, if you're going to attack someone in any way, this seems to be the most targeted way to do it. And then out of the other ones in the tier 1 group, we have Iran, and many of you listening probably know what I'm going to talk about. In June, the U.S. struck nuclear sites, right, all over the country of Iran. Trump said 6 bunker buster bombs were dropped, 30 Tomahawk missiles, and so forth. We haven't, again, known the exact number of casualties. It's been very unclear. Iran reported no contamination and everything's been evacuated. The U.S. said they rained hell. We have no idea, right? Do we think more strikes are coming in Iran? God, I hope not. I mean, it just depends, right, on how things escalate in the Middle East. Do they get into another spat with Israel? Does Israel get into another spat with them? How does the stuff in Gaza go? All these things. It seems not the most likely in the near term, but who knows? Iran can go crazy, and so can Trump. And so can Netanyahu. So a lot of instability. What was the case for, right? We were talking about that. Well, obviously stopping Iran's nuclear progress. We've been hearing for a long, long time. They're very, very close to nuclear weapons, yada, yada, yada. The case against, which is similar to all of these cases, is, is it legal in international law? Are we breaking sovereignty? Could this risk regional escalation? Was it effective? All these questions. What do I think? Unclear. I mean, in the short run, it clearly seemed to have worked to an extent of de-escalating that conflict. If people do remember, Iran and Israel were shooting rockets back and forth at each other. And kind of, it's like a 6 out of 10, I feel like. 6.5. It definitely could be illegal, though. I don't know. But I think as of right now, we might change our tune in the future. I'd say, probably, maybe. Oh, well, actually, there's one more in the low count I forgot to mention. It's Syria. This happened also in December. There were 2 strikes in other countries in December. Actually, 3 if you can count Venezuela, which we will be getting to. And this one is a little different in the sense that this was a retaliation attack. So Central Command says that this is a response to an attack that happened on December 13th on the U.S., right? And that is true, right? The U.S. was forces were attacked. I think 2 people died. That's sad. And then, of course, the U.S. launched what they called Operation Hawkeye Strike, which was 70 targets shot. They're saying 100-plus precision munitions. Jordan, the country of Jordan, was supporting of this. And again, we haven't got a clear death count for this in this giant 70-target wave. I've heard certain reporting says 23 terrorists were killed or detained, so something like that. But this seems a little bit more ongoing. The way it reads at the Central Command reporting on this, it feels like something that's like ongoing, like language like more than 80 operations over the last 6 months, our continued presence in the region, so stuff like that. The case 4, obviously, it's response to an attack. It's anti-ISIS rationale. And the case against is that the scale is obviously a lot more severe. This one, as long as civilians weren't harmed, again, that's unclear, seems pretty justified. If a terrorist group attacks the United States, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect the United States to strike back. Okay, so medium, tier 2. And when I say medium, I'm not talking necessarily about severity. I'm just talking about in terms of just pure quantity of strikes. And that becomes very, very clear when we talk about our next country, Venezuela, and its surrounding waters, I guess you could say. So these have been happening basically all summer, really picked up in September. And depending on the reporting, there has been around 30-plus strikes if you can count all the boats. But there was a land strike as well in December, right? Again, you'll see a lot of language more than 30. So 33 are definitely known. We don't know why. So, as long listeners will know, but people keep following the news, the administration has framed these as, cutting off drug supply, targeting narco terrorists, and stuff like that. Oh, they're coming to the country with drugs and stuff, things of this nature. Reuters has reported that these attacks have killed around 110 people. That's not even fully capturing the damage of the strikes that, got Maduro captured and stuff like that. So this is all very, up in the air for the full thing. Now, this one seems like pretty ongoing. I mean, we'll see how everything continues with Maduro. Will they stop? But, with Trump saying that the U.S. is now going to run Venezuela and the oil companies are going to go in and this and that. I mean, this is just a recipe for disaster, as I'm sure many of you feel when you hear about this. So, yeah, I would say an ongoing campaign. I see a lot of these language. So, yeah, this is going to keep coming. And, I mean, it's a pretty loose case for. I mean, it's deterrence, right? That's what Hegseth will say. That's what Trump will say. We're deterring drugs from coming in the country. The case against, well, it's illegal. It's breaking international law. Especially killing people without trial. You don't even know who they are. They've admitted they don't even know who were on the boats. Yeah, I mean, this is a no. This gets thumbs down from me in every case, even if, yeah, there's no process. There's no due process. There could have been survivors and they kept striking. I mean, this is just drama. I mean, big drama here. And obviously, in terms of escalation, I mean, this is probably the number one in the sense of we literally are enacting regime change live. So yeah, big deal. But in terms of just a pure count of strikes, it's actually in the mid tier, even though it's 30 plus. And that leads us to the tier 3, the most bombed countries by the U.S. In the first year of the Trump administration. And we've got Somalia. And there's been a lot of discussion about Somalians in Minnesota, fraud and things like that, which has definitely, something worth talking about and investigating. But it's kind of covered the amount of bombing the U.S. has done in Somalia this year. So since January, since Trump took office, right, there's been around 111 strikes in Somalia. Now, the reason for these strikes has been stated as targeting al-Shabaab, which is terrorist group, ISIS, Somalia, terrorist, right? And these are all basically just terrorist attack strikes, okay? So, again, we don't know for sure how many people have died. We've heard 14. We've heard 76. With terrorists, it's hard to differentiate between them and civilians when it comes to counts because, they're not really military. I mean, they're militaristic, but they're not like a country's military. So, the reporting on these numbers are always a little kind of confusing. The CENTCOM, which is the same thing as the U.S. Central Command, but for Africa, says no civilian deaths in its own assessment. That's good. Are there going to be more strikes? Definitely. I mean, I think this is a yes. There's definitely more of kind of this push towards Africa. Somalia is let's be honest, having a rough go at it for a while. So it's led to a lot of unrest in the region, a lot of hard governance and things of that nature. So there's a lot of drama there. So things can get crazy, and the U.S. can kind of go even crazier because there's no one really monitoring it that well. I mean, what's really, really interesting is that Somalia has had a really, really tough go this year, like I was just saying. But people don't realize, thousands of people have died in Somalia this year through different fighting and things like that. It's pretty rough. And, yeah, it's a tricky situation, right? So the case 4 of it, right, is just fighting Al-Qaeda, fighting ISIS. They worked with the Somali government that exists. Again is none of this is really authorized. There's really no oversight. if you're bombing this frequently, how do you know you're not going to hurt civilians and things of this nature? This, again, is like a more extreme version of the ones we talked about earlier. I don't know enough about it, frankly, to give a confident justified or not, but now you know at least the pro and against. And then the final country, the one that have been bombed the most this year by kind of a landslide, to the detriment of them, right, is Yemen. And many people remember a lot of the Yemen drama because of obviously the war plans being leaked via Pete Hegseth with the adding the Atlantic editor to the group chat. And that gaffe, that blunder kind of took over the news. It kind of almost like overshadowed the actual bombing, or what they called Operation Rough Rider. There were 339 strikes in 53 days, which is crazy, including one UK claimed strike, by the way, which isn't in that 339. These were over the Houthis because they were attacking Red Sea shipping at the time, so this was the excuse. There were also this thought of like, we're going to do this and then it will be done, right? It'll be a ceasefire after this, right? This was messy. According to the Yemen Data Project, at least 238 civilians were killed, including 24 children, around 450 plus civilians injured, according to 31 more children. Other reporting shows 84 civilians killed, so something in that range, right? Again, like we said at the top of the show, these things are hard to suss out because of the reporting, but I think you can kind of get a sense for that level of damage. Some people even have it as high as 200, some Guardian analysis. So who knows? Will there be more strikes coming? It depends. I mean, there's a ceasefire now, which is good. But ultimately, if the Houthis start attacking shipping, again, things can escalate really, really quickly in that region, as we know. And especially because, the relationship between Hamas, Houthis, Iran, and stuff like that, Hezbollah, when stuff gets dramatic over there, it can kind of trickle up over there or vice versa. So it all depends on how those things shake out. The case for this, right, is protecting international shipping lanes and deterring future attacks. The case against so many civilians died, was it really worth it? I mean, I think you could argue that some degree of attacks were worth it because of, it's a conflict, but clearly, 300 bombs. This is too much. We should never be killing any civilians, especially. So I'd say this is major, major overkill, literally. And even if the kind of spirit of the idea you could argue for, maybe this is too much and likely a mistake. And so when we look back on all these attacks, right, the first thought you probably think is, wow, this guy wanted a Nobel Peace Prize? No, but what's more interesting is the highly concentrated bombs that they do. So in the countries that they've really been attacked, it seems like the strategy of this Trump administration with Hegseth and stuff is just like big bombs, like hundreds of bombs, really wipe things out, areas out, rather than slower targeted. We saw a few of those more targeted attacks when we were going on the one, but in the areas that they consider very volatile, the Somalias, the Yemens, Venezuela, they go pretty crazy and pretty hard, and they go really fast. And that's a theme with the Trump administration in every sense, the shock and awe type of approach that they take to everything they do. And yeah, we can clearly tell that they do that in areas of interest. And, when you send hundreds of bombs out, there's really a high risk for civilians to get killed, as we saw in Yemen. And maybe that's not good. And I'll tell you this doesn't look like a peace president to me. And that's our show, folks. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you found that interesting. Let me know what you think by either writing in at thelonelyliberalpodcast@gmail.com or just commenting on YouTube. Love to hear what you guys think. Also, if you like the show, please give it a 5-star review wherever you are. That would be really appreciated. And tell people I love it. You guys are the marketing department. I really appreciate you guys so much. I love hearing people's stories about how they heard the show and whatnot. And I appreciate all of you so much. So we'll be back on Sunday with Rick to do the news per usual. Tons of news already to talk about per usual. And till then, take it easy. I'll talk to you later. Bye.